thank you very much, guys, for making the time. We have a small but eager audience. So, as you know, it's our first ever Play Better Coaches Bootroom. So it's a new project that we're pretty excited about. As you'll notice, it's a little bit different from what we typically do for presentations. So venue's different, a little more casual. So feel free if you'd like to drink, food, help yourself to order. And it's an opportunity that we'd like to do probably every 6 to 8 weeks in Saskatoon, and the same in Regina, where we're going to invite a guest presenter in that has some expertise in an area of interest. We'll have a little presentation and an opportunity to talk where we leave some of the politics and colors that we usually wear during the week aside and have a chance to talk as coaches about growing the game and bettering the game, which for me anyway has tremendous value. So I'm sending around just a sign-in sheet there, so I think I know everyone and have everyone's email, but I will send around as well. There's an online platform that there's a national kind of movement on the Play Better side that does have kind of an online presence there. So if you sign up there, we'll make sure that you know when the next one's happening, what's going on, and you can see the ones that are happening as well in different areas across the country. So we're very privileged today to have with us an expert, Dr. Adam Baxter-Jones, who some of you will know maybe not in the professional role, but for those that don't know from the professional side, tremendous researcher in terms of areas on growth and development and their impact on sport participation in particular. He's been involved heavily with the English FA and more importantly the Scottish FA on talent identification and how that fits in with development of players and a concept called biobanding, which in kind of our terms would be grouping players by maturational age as we do within the LTPD. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Adam's expertise. Feel free once he's done to stick around. We'll have a little bit of an opportunity to chat and socialize, and we'll go from there, and hopefully we'll see you again for the next one as well. So I'll get out of the way.
Okay.
Somebody knows what he's talking about.
Thanks, Dave. So so this is informal, so please feel free to ask questions as we go along as well. I mean, it's supposed to be an interactive session. So I think this is what we're here to talk about. We're really here to talk about whether or not is competition fair. So when you look at this, when you've got two kids exactly the same age, it's pretty obvious what's going to happen in that competition. But it's also true for soccer as well. So this was Percy Hoff sent me this picture, and I'm not, maybe some people you've worked with yourselves, but these are two Saskatoon under 14 girls. So you're seeing exactly the same. So really that's what I'm going to talk about today, is the idea of why we use chronological age and why we could use something else. And to explain the something else, I'm going to explain to you how kids grow and the inferences around that. As Dave said, I've done a lot of work with various organisations in the UK. I worked with the Lawn Tennis Association, the Football Association, the Swimming Association, and I also work with the Gymnastics Association, and all of that is around talent identification. So particularly during the childhood years, how to identify talent. So I'm not sure if any of you recognise this person here. What I did want to emphasise though is look at the balls that they had to play with. I mean, you worry about concussion now. Peter laughs. I think Peter's a similar age to me, so yeah. There you go, the star there. And Peter, I'm not sure if you're in this photo, or Mike, but this is, well there's Mike there, so Mike's over here. So this is our men's masters team. But concussion in those days, I mean, not only was the ball made of leather and roped together with, I don't know what with, but as soon as it got wet, it was really heavy. So what we're really talking about today, this evening, is chronological age versus maturational age. Or maybe I could put it better, years from birth, years from maturity. So ultimately, I know there's a lot of discussion as to whether older kids who are 15 should be playing with under 14s and all of that kind of idea. But you have to remember, it's fairly arbitrary the way we've decided to group kids by age. Age is a very arbitrary thing. It's, in the Olympics, in the original Olympics, when the Greeks first started, their only entry criteria was nothing to do with age. It was basically to do with the fact, and it was male only, but if you were a man, you could take part in the Olympics. And I think that's really what I'm talking about today, is making sure that, what do we know about growth? Going back to the Olympics, this is a book by Jim Tanner in the 1960s 1960 Olympics in Rome, and what he found was he measured all these people and he identified that they all had the body type that most suited to the sport. So again, what that suggests is there's selection. So how is selection working, I suppose, in terms of size? When I worked for the Sports Council in the 1980s, they had a motto which was sport for all. At the same time, there was a paper, this is in the British Medical Journal, and what this was actually titled was Sport for Tall. And it was related to the fact, to data from the Montreal Olympics in 1976. And what they found was that when they measured all the competitors, they were all tall. They were all the tallest of the population. And in fact, those who won the medals were also the tallest. And I think what I'm getting at is that, we're probably surprised that we all work with kids, but are we putting too much emphasis on physical dimensions, particularly for winning and things like that? So there we have our Boston Bruin, so it's physical dominance really is that what we're really looking for? We see it in senior sport. We've got footballers behind us. We know that footballers tend to be tall. But what are we doing with the youth? Here we have a couple of hockey players, 10 years of age. And of course, physical dominance is going to play an even bigger role in childhood sports. And it comes down to the fact that what's most important? Are we really looking for winners, or are we looking for participation? Wayne Gretzky then, 6 foot tall. This is a centile chart, and this is you can't see it, it's the 90th. This is his height. He's 6 foot tall. When he was playing, the average height was 6'1". The average male height at that time was 5'9", which is down here. So he was at what's called the 90th centile. So 90% of the population were smaller than him, 10% were taller than him. And I think the big question comes down to, okay, what was it as a child that that made him the star? I mean, we know the talent was there, but you also have to have the environment, and that's the environment we're talking about now. Working with children and making sure that they have the environment to succeed. And just as an aside, I know I'm talking about bio-banding, but some of the bio-banding is related to when you're born, okay? So if you think about it, if your bio-banding, if your age banding category is between January and December, if you're playing with someone born in January and they're playing against someone born in December, they're actually 11 months older. And in terms of growth, when there's rapid growth, particularly between about 10 and 15 years of age, that's going to make a huge difference. But interestingly, if we look, so here we have Gretzky was actually born in January 26th. So I wonder what would happen if he'd been born in December. Because when we look at the NHL, this is some data from the 1980s, you can see, you would expect this is the first 3 months, second 3 months, etc. So in a normal population, you'd expect all those bars to be the same. But what you can quite clearly see is that if to be a professional player, there's a huge predominance in the first 6 months of the year. So that suggests that if you're born later in the year, you're less likely to be selected. And let's go down to bantam. So here we have 14 and 15-year-olds at the same time group. You can see that some of that distribution is already occurring. But those chosen for provincial teams, there's also a predominance of being born early in the selection year. Sport for small then. So let's not forget that there are advantages in certain sports, such as gymnastics, where small stature is advantageous. And it's the other way around, that we know that this is at the Seoul Olympics, there was an issue as to whether or not these athletes were actually 16 years of age. Because gymnastics, after the 1970s, when you had the old Corbetts, they were 13, 14 years of age, there was a concern that they were too young. So it goes both ways. This is some data from the work that I did in the UK in the 1990s. And so you can see that when we look at the birth distribution, so the first 3 months, the last 3 months of the year, you can see that in terms of gymnastics, there really was no difference. It really wasn't advantageous one way or the other to be born where you were born in the year. And this data, this consisted of, these were boys who were selected to play for English Premier League teams. So we worked with their youth academies, and they usually came in at about 12 years of age. So again, you can see nearly 60% of the soccer players that we saw were actually born within the first 3 months of the selection year. And here's some data we did while we're here. So if you think of soccer in the UK, just transfer it to hockey here. It's the same idea of participation rates. So if we look at this was a bantam tryout for a Saskatchewan team. Here we have a control group of kids from Saskatchewan, from Saskatoon actually, where you can see there's a fairly even distribution in the birth dates. We then had roughly about 600 kids were trying out for this bantam team, and again you can see no difference in their distribution of births. However, once you get down to the second tryout, so this is when you probably had maybe the top 60 kids, you can now see there's a huge difference in the distribution. There's a definite bias to choosing the first 6 months of the year. And then if we go to the final team, which I think was roughly about 15 to 20 kids, that distribution is even greater. So you can see that when you're selecting, especially at 14 years of age, not only are you choosing the biggest kids, but you're choosing those who are born early in the year who have grown the most. So just to give you an understanding then of what's happening, so here we have this sport for tools. So what's the role of growth and development? Well, I always explain growth as a journey. And if we think of it as a train journey, when you're born, you're at station A. And when you're fully mature, you're at station D. And you have to go to station B and C in between times. And the way we do that is we look at it in terms of a route. So here is the height of an individual at birth, about 60 centimeters, through to about 185 centimeters when they're 19 years of age. And it's not a straight line. So what this indicates, the steeper the line, the faster the growth. So initially you grow pretty fast, and then between about 4, 5 and 9, 10 years of age, you have a gradual growth of roughly about 5 or 6 centimeters a year. And then once you get into your puberty, about 10 or 11 years of age, you suddenly have these sex hormones kicking in. So not only do they change behavior, but obviously they have a direct effect on growth, and you have this rapid increase. The problem is that people have these rapid increases at different times. The milestones in the journey then, just to indicate here, so at birth you're roughly about 30% of your final adult stature. And I should say this is the same individual who we measured on numerous occasions. So here we have them at 21 years of age. 2 years of age, then you're 50%, so you've grown half your adult stature by 2 years of age. And in girls it's about 18 months. Girls always mature slightly earlier. By 14 years of age, you're about 92% of your final adult stature. So ultimately, when it comes to banding individuals, if you know what your final adult stature is going to be, then you can actually look at someone's stature, look at their final stature, and have some idea on that distribution of exactly how close they are to being mature. So really what we do is we look at people of the same chronological age. So these boys are all age 10. The one with the ball in the middle is roughly average height for his age. But of course you've got someone who's considerably taller, and then the person at the end who's considerably shorter. Now, as I just indicated to you, when it comes to choosing teams and talent identification, we do have a tendency to look at these 4 at the end and say they're the ones who should be in our team. And of course, some of the reason behind that is because performance sometimes becomes too much of an outcome. It could be that this individual here has all the talent, and he's the one who's going to grow into the star. And so what we have to be very careful of is not to disadvantage him on his size. So his size should not be playing a role in putting him off, because sport is a very closed system. Once you drop out, very difficult to get back in again. So what happens when we have these what are called centiles is that we know that height is what's called normally distributed. So we know that 50% of the population, or what the average height is, and then we can line people up in size, so we know there's a top 5%, there's a bottom not 5% in distributions of height. What this ends up is looking at something like this. So this is what's called a percentile chart. So we have from birth through to 19 years of age. We have up until 2 years of age, your growth is very much dependent on the environment of your mother. So your mother basically is providing the food and the nourishment and the environment, the disease risk and all of those kind of things in the first 2 years of life is very much a reflection of that. That's why by about 2 years of age, as I said, you're roughly about 50% of your height. So the middle line here is saying this is the average line. So you can see that about 2 years of age, you're going to be about 85 centimeters if you're average, which takes you up to about 160 centimeters or so when you're fully grown. The expectation here then is this middle line is the average line. And this is a dot that represents you could measure a child at every single occasion and you'd expect them to follow this average line. The problem with an average line is it expects a child to be born of average weight, to be of average size at every single year, to have average tempo of growth, to mature at an average age. And so the reality is there are very few children who you'll ever find follow that normal average route. Far more likely is the extreme. So here we have a swimmer and a gymnast, and they're both 14 years of age. If we were to plot them on a centile, what's actually happening is you can see that they're starting off average, they're ending up average. But in these teenage years, there's suddenly a shift in the way they grow. So this person here suddenly grows early and grows fast. In contrast, the other 14-year-old starts at normal average height, ends up at normal average height, but decreases the temporal growth. So at 14 years of age, when you see the maximum difference, this is when you see the biggest differences in stature. And really what's happening, you could also explain this by saying, this 14-year-old has the body of the 16-year-old, this 14-year-old has the body of the 12-year-old. And that's really what we're talking about when we talk about bio-banding. As I said before, instead of thinking it in years from birth, just think of it in years from maturation. It's just a matter of trying to change our thought patterns into what we're trying to do. And the other important point is, up until 8-9 years of age, you're not going to see any differences, okay? But it's between 9 and 15, that's when you're going to see the maximum differences. And that's when you've got to start thinking about doing these bio-banding stages. This is my own daughter, Jessica, 10.5 years of age, and this is her friend at school, Hayley, who was 11.2 years. So you can see you've got someone here, and my daughter was always a fairly average growth line. And what we're really seeing is that Hayley had a slowing down, particularly once 9-10 years of age. So it's later timing, slower tempo. That's really what we're trying to get at here, is to understand that every child grows differently. And here's a picture of them. This is a grade 12 grad. So you can see that by the end, there really wasn't much difference. There's still some growth to go in these two, but that difference that we saw 4 years earlier has evened itself out. So in terms of boys and girls, as I said, they grow. This is just a diagrammatic information to show you that up until about 8 to 10 years of age, there's no difference in the stature of boys and girls, but then girls mature. And when they mature, it means they grow quickly. So between about 11 and 15, girls can be taller than boys. But then what happens is that the boys' growth spurt occurs, and that's why you end up with the average difference of about 13 centimeters between males and females once you get to that oldest age group. Growth differences occur even at a very young age. So this is my own children, Lachlan, who was born in 1997, and Dougal, born in 1999. And these are the charts that you're given at hospital when your child is born, and you can plot what they look like. So again, here's my 50th centile, the average height. or sorry, this is average weight, average length. And so you can see that my two kids follow different patterns. That Lachlan was always below average for weight and length, whereas Dougal, even at birth, was above weight. If we follow that on a bit closer, this is now 2009. Lachlan is in blue, Dougal's in red, so we have Dougal at about 10 years of age, Lachlan at 12 years of age. You can see that going back again from 2 years of age, you can see their growth, they're about average growth. But in terms of weight, there's a difference between the two of them, even at this age. So at 2 years difference, at 10 and 12 years of age, Dougal is already heavier, okay? If we jump forward to 2011, now we found with Dougal that he's way above average, 97th centile, so he's really tall for his age. Then if we look at his brother is slightly taller, but not as great as Dougal. And then moving to 2012, we can see that there's a pattern here. Starting in the 50th centile, it looks like Lachlan's going back towards the 50th centile. Dougal, though, is staying high. The other thing we can do is we can use the parental height. So my wife Jan's here. We can actually estimate in the green dot, this is where we're estimating that our two sons will end up in terms of stature. So that shows you the difference in timing and tempo. And one of the things maybe I should just say about Dougal is that Dougal at 12 years of age was tall for his age. He ended up winning a city championship, Pee-wee city championship at hockey. He then went on, and at 16 years of age, he was again still tall for his age, really helped him in his sport, and he captained an under-16 Saskatchewan football team which won a national championship. He's now been caught up by his peers and overtaken, and he just tried out for the under-18, this is 2 years later, and he didn't make the cut. So again, it just shows you that what I'm telling you here about size and the way the sport's choosing them, it happens to all of us. So what can we do about it? So I keep talking about size, okay? So this is some data so we've been following the same individual since the 1960s. So here we have three boys, roughly age 7, 128 centimeters, 120 centimeters, 130 centimeters. So obviously the boy at the end, it looks, these two here, 128, 130, they're taller than the boy in the middle. If we jump forward a few years, so apart from the obvious change in swimming bathing suits, 1970s style is going on, what you can see is still the boy in the middle. Remember, he's the shortest, he's 156 centimeters, compared to this boy now is 173, and this guy here who's 173 centimeters. So you can see that there's this difference in growth 7 years later. We've actually kept measuring these people, so they came back at 40 years of age. So now what I want to point out is the boy in the middle is 180 centimeters. The boy on this side is 195, the boy on this side 179. So actually these two ended up being the same, and the guy out here is the one who actually grew the most. So how could we, if we go back in time, how could we tell that? Because what we're saying is we thought this was the late maturer because he was the smallest. But the reality is that these two, this is the person who was most mature. He only grew a further 6 centimeters from 14, whereas these two both grew in the region of 23 centimeters. So as I say, size isn't everything. And really, this is a family, two siblings and mum and dad. You can see that height is far more, actual height is far more related to parental growth and what you're inheriting from your parents. So when you are working with a small child, it's going to be important to tell, are they just small because they come from a small family, or are they small because they're a late developer? So that's the work that we've been working on. So we've talked about the sort of time of when you're tall. Now I'm just going to talk quickly about tempo, and this is the speed of growth. So we talked about our journey in terms of going from this height here, 60 centimeters to 180, we can take this information and look at it in height in gains in centimeters per year. So what you can now see is the velocity of growth. So at birth, you're growing the most. As I said, by about 5 years of age, you grow at about 5 centimeters a year, up until you're about 10, 11 years of age. And then you get this rapid growth, where at this peak at 14 years of age, you're growing at roughly 10 centimeters a year. Here we have a diagram just showing you the same thing, but this is for boys and girls on the same graph. So you can see that girls grow at about 12 years of age, compared to boys who are growing at 14 years of age. There's also a big difference. Boys actually grow at about 10 centimeters a year, girls, so this is probably boys about 12 centimeters, girls about 9 or 10. This is some of the reason why boys and girls end up being different in height, because there is this magnitude of growth in boys that's not seen in girls. So if we go back to my daughter and Haley again, what we can say is that the person who grows early grows at a greater rate, but you can see has finished growing by about 14 years of age. Whereas somebody who's developing later, their magnitude of growth is less, but they're still growing by 18 years of age. So that's what we really have to do in the field. This whole idea of bio-banding is to get some way of showing the tempo of growth. And that's what we did a few years ago at the University of Saskatchewan. So one of the things we took into account was proportionality of growth. And this is just a slide that shows from birth. At birth, your head is roughly half its adult size. So we know that these kids with these big heads, it's true. The other thing is that your arms increase by 4 times their size, your legs by 5 times their size, and your trunk by about 1/3 of its size. So when you're born, you don't need your legs. You need your head, because that's where all the information is stored to make you grow. So you need to be born with that all intact. But you're not doing any movement, so the legs are growing later. And the way you grow is your hands and feet grow first. With, all of us got kids, the first thing that you grow out of is your shoes. Then you grow out of your pants, because your legs have grown, and then you grow out of your shirt. And so that's, every child grows in that sort of pattern. And so what I'm really telling you is, if we can look at the proportion of leg length growth to trunk growth, perhaps we can have some idea of the overall growth. And that's exactly what we did. So I showed you on those previous slides, these are called the peak height velocity, shown in the black line here. And in boys, in our group, was occurring at about 13.5 years of age, and in girls about 11.5 years of age. These legs here are actually measures of leg length and sitting height. So you can see that first of all you peak in your leg growth, and then you peak in your trunk growth. So using this information, what we did was we created a mathematical formula that will predict where you are in terms of a maturity age. So I said years from maturity. My maturity indicator is something called this peak height velocity. So we developed a way of first of all measuring someone, so we can measure their stature, and then if we sit them down and measure from the base of their spine to the top of their head, we'll have a measure of their trunk length. If we know their full stature and we take their trunk length away from that, we'll get the length of the legs. I had this online growth utility program. You can just go online, put in someone's gender, their date of birth and the date of test, so that will calculate their age. And then if we put in their height, their sitting height and their weight, what the program does, it gives you an output. It calculates your chronological age, your predicted age at peak height velocity, and your years from maturity. And so you can see here chronological age of 11.2, predicted age of 12.2 minus 1. So take 11.2 minus 12.2 gives you minus 1. So that would tell you that that child is 1 year away from their peak. Doesn't matter how tall they are. It's just telling you how far away they are. So you can look at two people, and if we did that again, so we'd say they're pre-peak height velocity. If we would do that again with somebody else in the group, they were also 11.2 years of age, but we saw that their predicted age at peak height velocity was 11. We know that they've already gone through their peak. So this is really what bio-banding is all about. It's thinking in terms of years from maturity rather than years from birth. And so what you end up with is you could have a group by these numbers, or you could just say those who are pre-peak height velocity are in one group, those who are post-peak height velocity are in another group. And really not asking to do anything that other sports don't do. Take wrestling, it's all based around size. It's all based around weight classes and stuff. So what you're really asking to do is in the soccer world is to say, let's stop putting those big kids against those little kids. And it might be great for the big kid, as I told you, my big kid hasn't done any favours in the long run. In the short term, yes, they're successful, but long term, are they really going to be successful? And that's what we're doing. I've been working with Dave from the soccer academies here, and I've also been working with volleyball, football, hockey, basketball, baseball. And I measured 850 athletes trying out for provincial teams that are 14 years of age, and that was 2 years ago. And now what I'm doing is I'm following up. So I'm trying to see, of those who were selected to the sides, are they still in the sport? And how did using growth and physical dimensions affect long-term sports participation? And then my final slide was really just to emphasize the work that we've been doing with the English Premier League. So last year, this was in August of 2015, 4 of the soccer academies in the UK used this bio-banding. So used that, what I just showed you, that prediction of age at peak height velocity, they used that to predict the age of these kids. And these are 12 and 14-year-olds, and I think it was Southampton, Norwich, I can't remember the other two, there was 4 of them basically. Did these, this is all in line with the English football academies, realizing that there was a disadvantage to just picking the biggest kids. So this is my most recent work, and just to finish, I actually worked in the 1980s with the Football Association, where they actually chose 14-year-olds and took the top 14-year-olds in the country, put them into an academy. They lived together, they went to school together, they played soccer together. The problem was, none of those 14-year-olds made it into senior schools. And so that was the issue. You've got to be very, so from a talent education, it's the same issue. If you're just choosing the biggest, you're going to be, you're not really helping the child for long-term success. So that's why I've been working with the Soccer Association here to introduce this idea of between 12 and 15 years of age, putting our sports stars together based around their maturity. Because I've talked about maturity in terms of size, but it has other knock-on effects. So for example, the more mature you are, the more mature your system is. For example, you'll have more hemoglobin in your body, which means you'll be able to transport more oxygen. So physiologically, you're at an advantage when you're more mature as well. So you're not just taller, but you have more lean mass. All of this just will have nothing to do with training. It's just due to the fact that you will grow in that way. There you go.